This podcast is for informational purposes only. Please seek guidance from a trusted healthcare professional. By listening to this podcast, you release Holy Health and any of our guests from all liability. I'd like to thank Joker Productions for editing this podcast. Hey guys, welcome back to what I'm going to consider the third consecutive episode of the newest season of the Holy Health podcast. I consider everything before 2 weeks ago to sort of be, I guess, season 1, or maybe we could call this season 3. It doesn't really make a difference. But for about a year and a half, up until October 7th of 2023, we were pretty consistent in putting out one new episode a week, with the exception of around certain holiday vacation times. And then October 7th, 2023 happened. And up until that date, our numbers were growing, our audience was growing weekly. And after October 7th, it wasn't a question in my mind. There was no way that I was going to be putting any new episodes out until we had some idea of what was going on around us. I did continue to interview many people. Some of those episodes have never been released. They're going to be released over the next couple of weeks and months, but I was unable to put episodes out. I just felt like nobody had the capacity to listen to much beyond the news and beyond what was going on over here in Israel. And so between January and 3 weeks ago, I maybe tried to release 3 or 4 episodes, and even I could not get myself to be consistent with it. I felt like, how can I be, asking Torah people to come on and do these Torah extras for me when half of them have children, fighting on the front lines, and just so many things around us were so unclear. Now, I'm not saying that we have total clarity now. We all know this war is not yet over. We all know that the ceasefire with Lebanon is a very tenuous ceasefire. We still have soldiers in the north. We still have soldiers, many, down in Gaza. There's no ceasefire down there yet. And we still have over 100 hostages still in Gaza. None of that is forgotten, but so much of that is out of our control that I feel like the one thing we can try to do is regain control in certain areas of our lives. And trying to regain control of our health is something that we can do. Now, the motto of this show is God decides when you go, but you decide how you get there. And so too, that goes with your health. There are so many things we can do to help improve our health. They are not always easy. Many of them are hard, but as you do them, they continue to get easier and easier and easier, just like any new skill that you learn. But this is one area where I felt like we could try to regain some control. And what I've decided to do, first of all, is I'm going to make sure that none of the episodes are longer than roughly an hour, because I don't think anybody has the ability to listen to longer than that. I know there are a lot of podcasts out there that are over 2 hours, but I find myself, even when I listen to some of them, I literally listen to maybe the first 30 to 40 minutes and then I'm out. And I've had the good fortune to interview some pretty incredible people. And so what we're going to do is we're going to be dropping many new episodes. And then here and there, we're going to re-release a possibly slightly cut down version with a new introduction of some of the other older episodes that many of you may not have heard, because I have been fortunate to interview some pretty incredible people. And one of these people is today's interview. Today's interview is with a woman named Elle Russ. It was actually first released in January of this year. I believe it was the first episode that I released after October 7th. And I feel like many of you who have heard this episode, believe me, it will not hurt you to listen to it again. The thyroid is the master gland of the body. When there's a problem with the thyroid, as you will hear, it will create many other problems. So you may hear some symptoms, or you may even have some of the things associated with thyroid and never have realized, or maybe nobody ever looked at your thyroid gland. It is really, really important to look at the thyroid when assessing many other conditions as well. And finally, you guys are going to hear at the very end Elle talking about something, and you're going to think that this episode was recorded after October 7th. It wasn't. This episode was first recorded in August of 2023. And I think you guys are going to hear what Elle was talking about even back then, pre-October 7th. I also would like to let everyone know, please, if you have any tzedakah or charity organizations that you know are trying to collect, whether it's for a group or some type of individual, any cause that you feel is really important, please let me know. I would like to help start promoting some of these causes as well. And if you think you would be a good guest for the show, or you think you would be a good Torah extro guest for the show, please feel free to reach out to me. There are links, and all of Elle's links and Bracha Krohn's links will all be at the end of this podcast. The extro is with my friend Bracha Krohn, who is one of my favorite teachers. And I think you guys will love how she took this and went with it in the direction that spoke to her. And I just love that. So I hope that we will really have a true end to this war soon, and our hostages will come home, and all of our soldiers will come home safely. Shabbat Shalom. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Holy Health. My guest today is Elle Russ. For over a decade, Elle has successfully coached clients all around the globe. Through her books, public speaking appearances, online courses, private and group coaching, Elle educates, inspires, and motivates. Elle is the author of, I'm not sure if I can say this on my podcast, Confident as, you can look it up, and The Paleo Thyroid Solution, a book which has helped thousands of people around the world reclaim their health and inspired Elle to create the most comprehensive thyroid course available, the Ultimate Thyroid Course. Elle is also the screenwriter of the award-winning documentary film Headhunt Revisited, and has written for and been featured in a variety of prominent publications such as Entrepreneur, Success Magazine, Podcasting Magazine, Mind, Body, Green, Prevention, and more. Elle has a degree in philosophy from the University of California, Santa Cruz. She lives in Southern California and is originally from downtown Chicago. So first of all, welcome, and thank you so much for making time for me.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
It totally is my pleasure. So I'm wondering, degree in philosophy, but yet you're writing about thyroid. How'd you get there?
Well, I think, it's very funny because, so I graduated in 1995.
Okay.
And since then, there has been, I don't know how many Simpsons jokes about philosophy degrees. There's always hey, how do you get rid of the pizza guy off your how do you get rid of the philosophy major in front of your porch, standing on your porch, pay him for the pizza? All these jokes about how useless a degree this was. I remember talking about doing it. People are what are you going to do? Stand on the side of the road and talk to people? What are you going to basket weaving? People make fun of it as a major. I would say this though, after all of these years later, it's the most valuable major I could have ever chosen. And I think one that most people should choose, because with philosophy, what you're doing is you are panning the camera very wide out. You are looking at all of the angles of a situation, an ethical conundrum, a problem, or whatever it is. And then you're paring it back down to find a solution. This is why Socrates himself wanted to have philosopher kings, because he felt that people weren't going to take voting seriously, that they weren't going to actually really ponder and da-da-da. So he thought, if we got a bunch of philosophers who were really evaluating all the angles, you would get the best vote. And that's how he felt. So philosophy has been extremely valuable. I think a lot of people get into it like I did, where you're looking up at the stars and you're like, why am I here? What does this all mean? What is this about? And you're looking for answers. And so one of the popular double majors in colleges is philosophy and physics. They're both kind of searching for the same thing in different ways. So I would say that, so given that, I never intended on really using it per se. I didn't really realize I'd write a second book that had to do a little bit with philosophy. My next book, a third book, is sort of on that topic. But what it did help me do was solve my thyroid problem. Again, critical thinking, the aspects involved in philosophy. And there's lots of people, I'm sure, who've solved things without it. But anyway, so it was an absolute accident that I became a health author. I had been in the creative industry in Hollywood, actor, and then a writer. I never thought I'd get into it, but like a lot of health experts, your test becomes your testimony kind of thing. We've gone through something, you get to the other side. One of my good friends, Palmer Kippola, wrote a book called Beat Autoimmune. She has cured herself of MS. It was a 20-year struggle, but she finally figured it out, and now she's helping others. Do you know what I mean? And so this is how a lot of us come to this. So I struggled. And when I struggled with thyroid issues, I lived in Los Angeles. We're talking one of the hubs of medical care in the world. I had the best insurance that you could buy. And yet, 24 endocrinologist doctors, expert hormone specialists, couldn't figure it out. They either tested me incorrectly, so they assessed it correctly. They either tested me correctly, but then assessed it incorrectly. They either tested correctly, assessed it correctly, and then treated me incorrectly. So there's all sorts of ways down the road here that they screwed up. And at one point, the reason I became an expert is because I took my health literally into my own hands. I became my own doctor. I would get blood work from doctors and then not give a shit about what they had to say, excuse my language, and just do my own thing. So I actually dosed myself back to health. I had to buy thyroid hormones on like black market internet and all this kind of stuff. Wow. So I eventually solved my first bout of hypothyroidism, maybe 2005, 2006. Yeah, 2006. And then I was going great for a few years on thyroid hormone replacement. I was taking Armour Thyroid, which is still a very viable, wonderful choice for thyroid hormone replacement. Not for people, though, that are averse to pork. You do not want to do that. But it's a T3, T4 combination. I was doing well. And then I got hit with what we call reverse T3 hypothyroidism. And I had a second bout in 10 years. And again, I was left on my own in the dust. I went to doctors that were like, this is too complicated. I don't know. And I'd be sitting there telling them, this is how we have to fix it. No one would help me. Once again in a decade, I was on my own, crying in the parking lot outside a doctor's office going, oh my God, I cannot believe I have to do this again by myself in Los Angeles with great insurance. So that is how I became a thyroid expert. And I've been coaching and helping people all over the world for like over 10 years, close to 15 now. And the story is the same everywhere. It doesn't matter if I'm talking to someone in Israel or Argentina or Saudi Arabia. It is the same uninformed doctor problem. Doctors being steeped in 1973, the year I was born, outdated protocols. And so what my book and what my course as a result, it dispels all of the outdated garbage, and it gives you the detailed things you need to know from a person who not only has been through it, but who doesn't have a science mind, okay? So I'm usually the best to explain it. If I can understand it, trust me, I hated math and science growing up. And I remember, really funny, my math teacher being like, you're all going to end up working at an amusement park, sweeping floors if you don't learn math, and all these kind of threats. And I remember being like, whatever. And it turns out, guess what? You don't. Turns out I wrote a science book that's a best-selling book, so touche to her. But what you really need to do is understand it on a theoretical level, which I do. And there's, again, where the philosophy comes in, but you don't need to have studied philosophy in order to understand it. So that's what I strive to do. And that's what I'm really good at, is explaining complex terms in ways that people can understand it. And now it might take a minute, but anybody can become as versed as me. Maybe it would take a little bit longer because, in coaching clients all over the world and seeing a variety of ailments, tangents, and nuances, you of course become more knowledgeable because you see things. So that's really how I became a thyroid expert. Absolutely accidental, but compelled to, and what would happen to me is I'd be out and about in the world and someone would bring up a thyroid problem and I would go, oh, well, this happened to me. And I help them and say, you got to get tested for this and da-da-da. And then it would keep happening. I wouldn't even bring up my thyroid problem. And then finally, one of my friends was like, maybe you should write a book about this. And at the time I threw it away. I was like, yeah, maybe someday, whatever. I'm doing other things. And then I met Mark Sisson, who pretty much is like one of the great grandpas of the paleo primal ancestral health movement. And going paleo changed my life. It also was highly related to thyroid health. I realized the connections, and I pitched it to him. And he was like, I've been wanting to do a thyroid book. And it was published in 2016, #1 bestseller, and it's still going strong. And then after that, over all these years, I finally was like, let me encapsulate everything I know into a course for practitioners, for people suffering. And my ultimate thyroid course is 30 hours. It's like a semester in college, and it involves, detailed medical expert opinions and other health experts. And so this is the trajectory. I will never stop talking about this till the day I die.
I think it's great. And that's one of the things I try to do on this show is I am really encouraging people to be their own medical advocate because, my father, who's a doctor, who himself has become very alternative, more towards, I'm not going to say functional health because he's not a certified functional health, but absolutely, he's 77, almost 78 years old, always learning, always growing, always looking at the next thing, and has turned a lot away from, typical Eastern medicine unless it's absolutely necessary. And I encourage people because especially, I find it a little bit different in Israel. I almost feel like they left out the course of bedside manner. It is so incredibly hard to get into medical school here that the people who get in almost have like a God complex because it is so incredibly hard and there are not enough doctors in Israel. And then there's 4 minutes a patient, right? So.
Well, and it's the ego. So what you're talking about there is like, it's hard to get into. Not only that, so the most indoctrinated doctors who have the highest egos in our country are endocrinologists, and they're supposed to be specialists in thyroid, but they actually know the least in my experience. Okay. And, why is that? I asked my doctor, my functional medicine doctor on my book and in my course, I said, why? What is it about that? And he goes, think about it. They've spent 10 years in medical school, $100,000, and now they're in a specialist. So they're like, don't tell me what to do. I know what I'm doing. I didn't spend all this time and money for nothing. And I went to Harvard. By the way, a Harvard doctor is a doctor that hurt me very much during my process. Okay. So just because somebody has a degree from a freaking Ivy League school means nothing. They can be just as uninformed. And so that's really important to know because I think people look at that like, oh, they went to Yale, they went to Harvard. I don't care where you went. I've met lawyers from Harvard who screwed up stuff for me and I had to catch their mistakes. And I'm not a lawyer. So we can't gauge it on that. We talked about patient advocacy. It's hard to speak up. We feel when we walk into a doctor's office like they're there to help us. Well, you know what? You're there to help them help you. And the more educated you are about your situation, the more you're able to steer them in a different direction, even towards something that they may not be used to practicing. But you can encourage them to practice medicine with you if they see that you're knowledgeable enough. Half of my conversations with clients are about approaching the doctor. And in what way, right? And advocating for oneself. I had a doctor who patronizingly laughed at me many, many years ago when I asked for a B12 test, literally laughed in my face. And I said, did you just laugh in my face? And he's like, it's on that. I go, just take the test. Guess who had a B12 deficiency, everybody? Sure. You know what I'm saying? F that guy, right? That's the same guy who patted my gym shoes when I was having all these thyroid symptoms and kept going back to him. And he goes, just use these more and eat less. So accusing me of a closet eating disorder because I'm exploding, my body's exploding at an exponential rate and I'm working out 2 hours a day. And this guy, all because he used outdated protocols. He took the wrong tests. So again, I was hurt, misdiagnosed by many, many doctors until I finally took it into my own hands. And I haven't suffered since.
I think it's incredible. Okay, can we first off, and again, exactly what you said, I like to explain things to a very basic level. I'm a physical therapist. I do the same thing. I educate my patients about every single thing we're doing and why. So can we just talk, can you tell us a little bit about the thyroid and why is the thyroid so important? What does it do why is it so important?
Yeah. So the thyroid is, for those who are watching, or even if you're not, if you're a man, it's below your Adam's apple, but it's a butterfly shaped gland at the bottom of your neck. And it is the master gland of the human body. Not because I say so, you could just look it up. This is just what it is. And why? Why is it the master gland? Because it is responsible for the production and regulation of our sex hormones. Okay. So just let's set aside this for a minute. So someone comes in and they've got a hormonal imbalance. Do you give them hormones to balance it? Or do you go, why? And look at the thyroid. Look at the thyroid. Okay. It also has everything to do with our heart rate and our temperature. Okay. So again, you know what I mean? Those things can always be off. Check the thyroid. Let's say you have really bad lipid panel results, the cholesterol labs. And the doctor's like, oh, no, no, no. You check the thyroid, because if your thyroid is not optimized, you do not have enough of the fat burning T3 thyroid hormone in order to burn the fat that you're eating. And yeah, your cholesterol labs are going to look terrible. You may have high blood pressure, but before going to the blood pressure medication, same goes for the brain. We have more receptors in our brain. Excuse me, let me clear my throat here a second.
Sure, no problem.
We have more receptors in our brain for T3, the active thyroid hormone, than we do for anything else. So when someone is low in thyroid hormones, they often will experience things like brain to hand dexterity issues, messy handwriting. You were very coordinated. Suddenly you're bumping into stuff. You speak like a dyslexic. Things are backwards. You can't figure out how to get the words out. You can't find the words. You feel like you're getting dumb. Something's happening to your brain. You've got brain fog. You're staring into space. You've got general malaise. You're like, all these things I cared about. I don't know. What's it all for? Kind of that is how your brain is affected, and it is related to your levels of happiness. So you go into the psychiatrist and they're like, you need Prozac. The Prozac will work for a couple of months. If you have a thyroid problem, it'll stop working because you never got to the root of the frickin' problem. Now, there's a big psychiatric hospital here in LA. I ended up meeting at one point at an event the head of that hospital. And I said to him, hey, before you put anyone on SSRIs and all that kind of medication, do you fully check their thyroid? No,
They thought you
no,
were crazy.
they don't. They don't. You have to go there first, or you will never get anyone there. Perfect example. 25-year-old came to me, male, low testosterone. That shouldn't happen. He's 25. That should not happen. Didn't have a pituitary tumor, shouldn't happen. Instead, the doctor, dum-dums, didn't go, wait a minute, he's 25. He should have high testosterone. Let me check the master gland that's responsible for this. And so they didn't. Instead, the guy put him in testosterone, and it didn't change it. He comes to me, he had a horrible thyroid problem. In that scenario, you get off you raise the thyroid, you get off the testosterone, and his testosterone comes back, and he probably won't have to replace it till he's 60 or something, right? So these are the things that happen. Everything is a downstream domino effect of the thyroid. For example, you can't live without it. So it's very rare that a child is born without a thyroid gland. When it happens, intellectual disability will set in immediately, if not death quite soon after, if they don't catch it quickly. I actually one time said on an interview, for the one in Gajah, I'd love to meet someone. Someone reached out to me. They're like, actually, I was born with out of thyroid, and they discovered it so quickly that I was able to. So you cannot live without it. So you'll die. Okay. If you're on a stranded island and you don't have a thyroid and you don't have your thyroid hormones with you, you're probably going to be the first of the group to go. So if you can't live without a thyroid gland, AKA the thyroid hormones it provides, what do you think life's going to be like when you've got subpar levels? It's like a slow death. You slowly fall apart. First this symptom, that symptom. Now this doctor's trying to do patchwork on you. Next thing you know, you look like a freaking quilt because they're just patching you up for all the symptoms you're getting from this main problem. And hypothyroidism has over 30 to 40 symptoms that I list on my website in my book. So it is massive. So any of these symptoms, a doctor could go, oh, do that, unless they're going, let's rule this out. So you always want to rule out the thyroid for almost anything.
So, okay, a couple of questions come to mind with this. So first of all, you go to the doctor because this is what happens here. Generally, it's TSH. Maybe they check, I don't know, maybe they check T3, T4. There's no such thing as a reverse T3 test here for sure. So, and then they just put you on levothyroxine or something like that. What do you have to say to that?
I have a lot to say about that. So, okay. So, first of all, and I have a free thyroid masterclass. So just real quick, freethyroidmasterclass.com. And in there is a free guide that lists all the tests and more about what I'm saying and so much more. So you can always go there. But let me just rattle off. If you think, do I or do I not have a thyroid problem? There are 4 main critical must-have tests. And then you always, if you do not, or if you don't know whether or not you have the autoimmune form of thyroid issues, which is called Hashimoto's, you would want to add those too. So we're talking like 6 tests. Okay. Now there's other related tests you can take and you go down the rabbit hole, but just do I or do I not have a problem? And these tests are TSH, free T4, free T3, reverse T3. That's the main 4. Then you got the 2 for the Hashimoto's antibodies you want to rule out. And by the way, doctors usually only test for one, not the other. You can be positive for one and not the other, or both. So you have to get both tested. One is called TPO, stands for thyroid peroxidase antibody. The other one is TG antibody, stands for thyroglobulin antibody. So free T3, free T4, TSH, reverse T3, TPO antibody, TG antibody, those 6. That will, now you get tested in the morning, a couple hours after waking up, black coffee, tea, water, don't have food, supplements, medication, get those tests. And also, if you take thyroid hormone replacement, you never and do not take it before the test. The doctors will go look at these tests and they'll go, yeah, whatever, I'm testing total T3. I had this happen to a client recently. They said, I need to get these tests. Can you give me these tests, the ones I just mentioned? They said, yes, that's fine. But they argued with her about total T3 being better than free T3. And you know what they did? They just decide on their freaking own. They just go, this patient doesn't know anything. I'm the one with the medical degree. So we're just going to test total T3. And sure enough, the test came back and they had not tested free T3. So free T3, free T4, not total T4, not T4 index. Okay, so these are all laid out in my free thyroid guide that's in my free thyroid masterclass. These are the tests you must get. If you want me to explain the thyroid feedback loop and why the TSH isn't the test to take, the TSH is a 1973 test that nobody in the world who knows what they're talking about with thyroid would ever use as a sole measurement. And if you're listening right now and your doctor has put you on thyroid hormone replacement or not put you based on a TSH, you are dealing with an uninformed doctor. You better run to my website and get educated. So TSH stands for thyroid stimulating hormone. Okay. And what it is it's really a signal. It's not a thyroid hormone, actually. It comes from the pituitary. And it is just a messenger. And the TSH is a signal that says, hey, thyroid, we've noticed that her blood is low in thyroid hormones. We'd like you to wake up. And that wake up call is the TSH. It's a signal. So without going any further into describing the feedback loop, everybody should be able to understand the following. Let's say I order a package from Amazon and it doesn't show up. I don't keep ordering it. I check tracking. Did it go somewhere else? Did it get to my address? Was it left at the neighbors? Like, where is it? I don't just keep ordering it. So when doctors keep testing this signal, what they're missing is, A, did the thyroid receive the message? Number 1. Number 2, did the thyroid receive the message and do its job properly? Not only that, did the thyroid receive the message? Did it do its job properly by pumping out the right amount of hormones? And then, did that process do its job properly by converting into the right ones to make the difference? So there's lots of steps along the way. If you are just evaluating the signal, you're evaluating the wake-up call. And we just don't do that. It's old-timey. It's 1973. So a lot of people are, like, for example, this has happened to even Mark Sisson and some athletes who are fit and have never had a thyroid problem in their life. They wake up fasted, they go to the gym, and then they go in to get their annual blood work. And the TSH, which normally in the States is like 0.45 to 5.0. Okay, just let's say 1 to 5. Let's say that person just worked out. They go in for their annual blood draw. Now you see they just worked out. Their brain is probably sending the message like, hey, time to wake up and give this person thyroid hormones. And at the time that they take the TSH test, the signal might be, in these scenarios that I'm talking about, they were at like 3.5 or 4. So towards the top there. And the doctors were like, oh my God. I think you have a thyroid problem. We need to give you And they were like, I've never had a thyroid problem and I've never had a thyroid symptom in my life. I'm fit. I feel great. Like, what? That's why we never gauge it. It's an important gauge and it means a lot in reference to the other tests, but it is not something we solely go on. Can it tell us a lot? Yes. So for example, I just mentioned the range is roughly 0.5 to 5. If someone's TSH is 120, I can tell you right now that I know they're suffering because that is the brain screaming, wake up, wake up. And so, when you see something that crazy, you kind of can predict what's going on. And in those scenarios, they're likely going to have almost zero T4 and T3. They will likely have neither of these hormones present or extremely low amounts, which is why the signal's so high. The wake-up call is loud. It's trying to get the body to do something. So yes, if you saw a TSH of 140, you still wouldn't dose someone based on that. It would be absolutely incorrect to do that, but it would be correct to go, yeah, we're going to take the other test because that's definitely a problem. Even if you had a normal TSH, you still don't go by that because you can have a normal TSH and have these other labs be off and still be suffering. So we never go by this. It's a 1973 test. It's extremely outdated and nobody who knows what they're talking about for real uses it as a sole measurement. We use the others as well.
Okay, because I do feel like it's used a lot here. And then I feel like anytime I could be wrong, but anytime there's a thyroid problem, I think levothyroxine is T4. Is that what's really given? And maybe they don't have a T4 problem.
No, they did. So here's the thing. So it is the same in the United States. So what she's talking about is T4. T4 is a thyroid hormone, but there are two. One is T4 and one is T3. T4 is inactive, okay? Meaning it's like a prohormone, like a storage hormone. It stores up, and as your body needs it, it will convert into the biologically active, fat-burning, make you feel good, brain working right T3. Okay, which is why we have to test T3 to see, did it convert? Did it do the job? Because T4 is useless unless it converts to the thing that matters. I just had a client the other day who had, this happens all the time. The doctors just kept giving them more T4. When I looked at the test, they were basically overdosing that person, making them hyperthyroid, and they actually gave the patient another thyroid problem by trying to treat incorrectly the first one. So here's how it goes. Our bodies, when they're working correctly, pump out about 80% of T4 and about 20% T3. So back in the 19th, I'll just give a brief little history shot here. In the 1800s, this English physician was brilliant. People had goiters on their thyroid, which is just an enlarged thyroid gland. And he came up with, let me extract some thyroid from a sheep and inject it into the humans. Turns out it worked. Thus, that became natural desiccated thyroid hormone replacement in the form of pigs, which had roughly the same ratios of T4, T3 as our body pump out. Okay, so people went on this stuff and they were doing great. 1950s rolled around, drug companies came on board. You can't patent natural desiccated thyroid, so they can't make any money. So they come up with T4 only. They come up with levothyroxine. And at the time they come up with this, they go and bash all the NDT, say it's for pigs, not humans. It's terrible. By the way, it's absolutely viable medication. People use it all the time. It's fantastic. Other than having an objection to pork, it works great. And so they couldn't patent it in the 50s. So they came up with this. And then all of the endocrinologists became just like, that was the only answer. One size fits all. And then what happened is people started getting sick and it wasn't working because T4 only often fails people. It is not endocrine mimicry. A T4, T3 combination is, like natural desiccated thyroid or synthetic T4, T3, whatever, but T4 alone. Our bodies were not meant to completely live off of conversion of T4 alone. Our bodies do give us some direct T3. So then time went by and, internet, and people, integrative health, people went back to Armour, they went back to the old school treatment and suddenly they're like standing up out of wheelchairs, like people were feeling great. And then it became, maybe we need to take a look at this 100-year-old viable choice for thyroid hormone replacement. Still to this day, levothyroxine T4 only is what most doctors will just give you right off the bat. And it often fails and it's usually not the right move. Can it be the right move? Does it work for some people? Sure. But I know, it's so funny, even when you're a thyroid expert, people that who have thyroid problems, and you're like, why don't you ask me my opinion? Like they just, and I know someone who's been on Synthroid for years, yet I still, on a text thread, see her complaining about dry skin and hair and all of the symptoms. And I'm like, yeah, because you're on T4, man, switch up. You can lead a horse to water. I can't force these people to do something different. So That is the problem. Everyone's given T4, one solution solving everything. It doesn't work. They also don't test correctly, and they can actually make a situation worse, and they can make someone even more hypothyroid. And that's what people don't realize, is that you can be horrifically hypothyroid while you're on thyroid hormone replacement if you are not with someone who knows what they're talking about.
Well, first off, I can tell you that even though, right, like we're talking pretty much to a kosher audience. Again, everybody has to ask their own rabbi, but like my mother got permission years ago to take Armour thyroid because that was what worked for her.
Well, I'm half Jewish, but I eat pork. I have a lot of Jewish clients and even Muslim clients. Look, there's everybody across the board who's got or vegans, people that just might have an aversion to animals. Right. There is nothing wrong with taking synthetic T4 and T3. And there's nothing wrong with, there's also compounded T4 and T3, which that's the solution for people that are so highly sensitive to fillers and things like that in medications that it needs to be completely removed and clean. And so and also the other benefit of compounded, and I'm not suggesting it as a first choice of business, but the other nice thing about compounded is when you're cutting up a natural desiccated thyroid pill, the hormones are bound in there. You can't like pick out 1 microgram or 2 micrograms. But when you're talking about compounded thyroid, they can like couture it down to the dose that's right for you. It's also a pain in the butt for a lot of reasons. There's nothing wrong with synthetic T4. All the people that I know who have aversion to pork just go for, T4 and T3 synthetic.
So what about, let's say someone has Hashimoto's, right? That's an autoimmune disease. Do you recommend that someone only take hormones, or do you recommend looking sort of beyond, maybe at gut health or other things that may be affecting their thyroid?
So I'll just briefly explain Hashimoto's. So Hashimoto's is an autoimmune disorder. And for those that just kind of are like, wait, yeah, but what does that totally mean? When you have an autoimmune disorder, rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis, Hashimoto's, any of that stuff, your immune system makes a mistake. And when it makes the mistake, it starts attacking a part of your body. So when you have rheumatoid arthritis, your immune system makes a mistake, starts attacking the joints, right? You have multiple sclerosis or even type 1 diabetes. The immune system makes a mistake, starts attacking the pancreas, and eventually the pancreas gives up, and now you've got to take insulin, right? So Hashimoto's, the immune system makes a mistake, and it starts to try to murder your thyroid gland. One of the things we know for sure with almost all autoimmune disorders, particularly the ones I mentioned, multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis, Hashimoto's, gluten absolutely ignites the antibodies. 100%. We see it all the time in blood labs. So yes, you have to make a dietary change if you'd like to get better. Because here's the thing. There are people that are on thyroid hormone replacement and they're doing great. They feel great, but they still have Hashimoto's and there's antibodies lingering in the background. They may not, quote, feel the antibodies at that time because they're treated appropriately, but it's still a silent killer. You do not want antibodies. Antibodies beget more problems, 200% chance increases in cancers, other issues. You don't want it. It's inflammation. So your goal as someone with any autoimmune disorder is to get the antibodies down to very low or undetectable levels. So the people who've cured themselves of rheumatoid arthritis, if you tested their blood today, they don't have it, but they were once in a wheelchair told that they would never get out of it for 10 years given biologics, all right? But they changed their diet. Now, it's not going to work for everyone. There's people that go gluten-free and they go paleo AIP, autoimmune protocol. You can look it up. And they clean it up and the antibodies are still stubborn. There are solutions for that, something called low-dose naltrexone. Won't get into that right away. With Hashimoto's, when you catch it quickly and early and you make dietary adjustments and nutrient optimizations, you can kind of maybe bet that you might be able to stay off thyroid hormone replacement. If it's gone on for too long, you may not be able to. So many times we see people, they're not feeling good. You take the test, their thyroid levels are normal, but the antibodies are there. And then you ask them like, hey, are you eating a lot of gluten? Like, and always they're like, yeah, I am. And you're like, okay, well, I've seen them drop in half. So they can be at 1,000, they can be at 80, it doesn't matter where they are. Your goal is to get them to as low as possible. So if you can do that naturally, great. I always suggest that. My book and my course is not about get on thyroid hormone replacement right away. It's about, let's try all these other things first. give it 12, 16 weeks, like, let's see. But if not, here are the tools you need to move forward. And at least you've already primed your body and cleaned it out as much as you can in a hypothyroid state, because a diseased body doesn't really detox well. You know what I mean? And then the other problem on the other side of this is people who've been suffering so long trying to find natural alternatives. And it's been like 3 years and you're like, what are you doing? You are headed towards destruction. Get on thyroid hormones now. And maybe get there, get better, get to a primal baseline. We have normal metabolism, normal heart rate. Then you detox, do all the things, get better, blah, 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 get it in order. Then you can try to go off thyroid hormone replacement. Okay. So it's never a rest of my life. The other thing I hear is, I'm scared. I don't want to take this medication. It's not medication. Kinda. It's a hormone. All right. The reason that you see a laundry list of side effects for, let's say, the birth control pill is because it's a medication that's manipulating our bodies into doing something it shouldn't do. Look, I've got no moral, ethical issues against birth control. I'm just saying it's manipulating our bodies as women to do something it's not meant to do. Therefore, you're going to have a lot of freaking problems. That's why that's a rap sheet of side effects that could happen from that. Not with thyroid hormones. They are not a drug of abuse. And also, it's giving your body what you need, what you're missing. So I don't want people to be scared about it, because it really is one of the most innocuous things you could take in this world. You're worse off taking a Pepcid AC. That's going to do more damage to your body than a thyroid hormone. Now, that's not to say that they can't do damage. Bodybuilders abuse thyroid hormones to burn fat, and you can F yourself up that way, but it's normally not a drug of abuse. So yeah, hopefully that cleared up things. But yeah, T4 only been just too long, and then people being very scared, or am I going to have to be on this forever, or trying to long the natural route, and I have to have this just like this talk with these people. It's like, you got to have a revelation here and realize that, how's it working for you? You're still suffering 3 years later. People are like, well, I'm thinking about doing another detox. You can't detox. You're hypothyroid. The other thing that's crazy too is because weight gain is such a symptom of hypothyroidism, until you fix it, of course. It's such a symptom. And this is what happens. It's usually the last thing, of all the symptoms to go away. You usually start to feel better in the brain. And then, of course, the weight slowly falls off. But people are always like, what can I do in the meantime? And I'm like, don't do anything. It's a mind effery, because us as humans go, well, you get fat, so you eat less and work out, or you go work out to combat it. So you're getting fatter and fatter. So you go work out, and then you don't want to not work out, even though you're still getting fatter, because you're like, well, then I'll get even fatter then. And the thing is that your working out is actually making you fatter, because when you don't have thyroid hormones available, your adrenals will take over pump cortisol. Now you're fat around the middle. So I usually ask people after exercising a couple hours later, how are you feeling? You feel tight and, feel that, or do you feel more bloated and exhausted? It's always the latter. It's always the latter, because when you are working out in a hypothyroid state, it's never, they're like, yeah, but I feel better afterwards. I'm like, yeah, because you just punched your adrenal glands into producing adrenaline and cortisol. You know what I mean? It's a temporary fake high. So it's hard to accept, trying to not going for modality. You're trying to put modalities onto a body that can't accept it. You don't have a metabolism. So you'd be better off literally not working out and accepting it and solving your thyroid problem and resting, and this is a hard conversation I have to have with people, because this was me too. I went to the gym anyway, and I kept getting fatter and fatter, and I felt more bloated a couple hours later, but I kept going. I was making it worse. You're taking 5 steps backwards. And that's a longer discussion, but this is the kind of thing that happens. You don't have to, it's not accepting weight gain for your life. It's accepting it in the moment, realizing you are in a body that can't burn fat. And you will once you fix it, but you can't right now. So don't try to do a thing that only works on regular non-disease, you see what I'm saying? Right. And so those are the kind of conundrums that happen in people's minds as they're going through this, and it's tough.
No, for sure. And also it's so the antithesis of what we're indoctrinated with. It's, work out, and the more you work out. And so I recently did an episode, I don't know if you know Jim Laird, about, the harmful effects of overexercising. And when somebody has an autoimmune disease, or, if you have MS, sometimes you've got to let your body heal in order it's got to heal itself first. And when you're creating inflammation, even when you exercise, and sometimes you've got to like just lower inflammatory levels in the body.
There, bingo. It's inflammatory. It's inflammatory at that point. You're doing yourself a disservice. You would be better off literally. And then people are like, so, and they'll be at like the gym lifting weights and stuff. And I'll ask them like, well, what are you doing? They're like, well, I lift this many times a week. And I'm like, how's it going? How you looking? Because I guarantee you that you probably just feel bigger and fatter because you think you're building something underneath what? Fat? Are you even really building muscle? It's always the case. I felt the same way too. You're fat, you go work out, you just kind of get like, you're lifting weights, trying to burn the fat, but the lifting weights on a hypo body doesn't burn fat. Lifting weights on my non-hypo body because I'm on the right levels of thyroid hormone replacement, now I'm normal. If I eat too much cake, we know what's going to happen. If I don't and then go extra, I have a normal metabolism now. That's the goal. We are Goldilocks as human beings. And you see these people at the gym and they're on the elliptical charging. And, everyone's like, oh, I want to get a fast metabolism. No, you don't. Because the species that have the fastest metabolisms don't live long, like hummingbirds. Okay. And you're done. You don't want that. You know what I mean? But what you want to do is optimize the metabolism you have. And so when you're treated correctly on thyroid hormone replacement, the weight will just slowly fall off until you get there. And then your efforts work. Then you're normal again. So if you're on thyroid hormone replacement and you're still struggling with weight and it's not like an eating paradigm or something, yeah, you might be on the wrong dose. You might be on the wrong combination. You might be on the wrong dose, wrong combination, and wrong timing. There are things to be done there that can operate it. So and this is what happens going back to symptoms. I'm not saying depression can't happen when you're not hypothyroid. There are people who've never had a thyroid problem who have legitimate depression. But what I'm saying in that scenario where I said, you don't want to go, check your thyroid first.
Right.
It's like people, that you'll be on thyroid hormone replacement. Some of the symptoms might be gone, but then you go in and you're still complaining about depression. And then the dumb doctor goes, oh, well, you have hypothyroidism, and that's one of the symptoms. Here's the truth. You don't have any hypothyroid symptoms. Once you correct it, they're all fixable. They're all manageable. You don't have any. So that's a doctor that doesn't know how to treat you. So if that doctor's like, oh, well, you have lingering depression. Oh, well, that's a hyposymptom. No. That's your failure and misunderstanding as a doctor, not being able to treat me correctly to get me on hypothyroid as a patient using thyroid hormones, because you can do it. And you can do it in other ways too. So I hope that makes sense, because, people will run to things, or they'll think, well, and again, they don't know better. They're not informed. And that's the whole point, right? Is that you have to be uninformed so that you can help direct your care, because then the doctor will just put you on Prozac. And again, it won't work after 3 months because you're still not on the right amount of thyroid hormones, right? So it is the full elimination of symptoms is what we're looking for. The only other scenario where there might be some lingering ones is with some stubborn Hashimoto's situations, or people that have like Hashimoto's and Lyme disease and EBV, and they're going through menopause. Okay, yeah, there's a lot to deal with. That could take a minute. But for the most part, 99% of the situations that happen with hypothyroidism can be corrected in several months, like 3-4 months if you do it right, and feeling better throughout those 3 months. And then, 6 months, in the grand scheme of your life, it really is a blip in time, how quickly you can get better. But people make so many mistakes along the way. And in my book, and partially in my thyroid guide, I talk about the mistakes that doctors and patients make along the way so that you don't do them too. And again, not trusting your thyroid health in the hands of a doctor. Please get educated. Even if it's like you just watch my free thyroid masterclass over and over again to understand this stuff. Whatever you got to do, because you need to take control of it. Of course, I privately coach and all of that stuff, but my goal is to empower everybody with the knowledge I empowered myself with.
Well, listen, I think that's great, because I think that's what people should be doing. Is you've got to understand it. Once you understand it, you can advocate for yourself. Yeah. So if they don't I don't think they test for free T3 and free T4 here. I think they just test total. Because even when I asked for free,
You might need to go to another country. You might
Yeah.
need to push it. Kaiser Permanente, which is a health insurance outfit in California and elsewhere, they don't even test reverse T3. You can't even get T3 in a couple of countries, but for the most part, T4 and T3 is available in almost every country, and so is natural desiccated thyroid. The tests aren't, though. In fact, I think in Canada still, they have to send the reverse T3 test to the States.
that's what it is. I think it's not free T3, free T4. I think it's the reverse T3. I don't think
The reverse T3 is the hardest one. And the tough thing is in the States, you've got some home prick test kits, which are great, especially if you don't have a doctor and you want to cheaply find out what your thyroid is. They're missing the reverse T3 though. And I will say this, if you're missing that test, and without going into a long lecture about what it is, you are missing such a huge part of the picture that you could be going in a really bad direction without it. So you really do need to know it.
So could somebody have completely normal TSH and free T3 and free T4 and still have a reverse T3 problem? Or would you at least see other things?
They could. An example would be something I saw yesterday. So, well, there's always a little something that might tip it off. Okay. Symptoms would tip it off in general, but it would sometimes the free T4 is above. Okay. I'll just, ranges are different wherever you go, but in the United States, a free T4 range is roughly 0.8 to 1.8. In that range, you don't really want to see anyone, normal people, no thyroid hormone replacement, they're at like 1.31. Okay. Like normal people, no problems, great metabolism, 1.31. That's the average. Then when you're on thyroid hormone replacement, especially if you're on T4 or T3, you might see it at like 1.4, but it really wouldn't go above that. So yesterday I saw a free T4 at 1.8. I didn't even have to look at the reverse T3 to know that it was going to be a bad reverse T3 because the doctor just kept giving them T4. Now the body's like, too much, we're not converting, and it's over converting into the inactive. So there would be some tip-offs, but in general, someone could have a decent free T3 or everything normal, and then the reverse T3 tells the story. Luckily, I had the time and the wherewithal. When I was solving this, there were no podcasts. There really weren't a lot of websites out there. This was 2005. There weren't podcasts, so people weren't even talking about it. There weren't websites to this. The only person, and I always recommend her work because she helped me save my own life, is Janie Bowthorpe. She wrote the book called Stop the Thyroid Madness. She's got one of the best websites for thyroid called Stop the Thyroid Madness. I am aligned with her in a lot of thinking, and she helped me save my life. The other author, there's thousands of thyroid books out there, and they're a waste of time, except for mine, Janie Bowthorpe, Stop the Thyroid Madness, and another guy out of England who self-published a book, and he also helped me save my life with my second bout of reverse T3 problems, and his name is Paul Robinson, and he wrote a book called Recovering with T3. So those are the other resources that I always suggest.
Okay, well, that's excellent. And we will definitely link some of them as well. So let me ask you, this is the one I ask everyone all the time. What does spirituality mean to you?
To me, it's a connection with the unknown. I find that my church, I guess you would say, my temple, is documentaries about the cosmos. I'm not kidding. I am so in awe about the unknown and the great expansiveness of it all, but I don't subscribe to any organized religions. I do not darken doors of churches or temples unless I'm on tour of one. I'm not a participant in that. I think because I grew up in a very diverse city of downtown Chicago. I grew up with everyone of all sorts of religions, but the good schools there at the time were like the Catholic private schools. And so I was forced to go to religion class and read the Bible and all this kind of stuff. And I had a lot of questions because a lot of stuff didn't make sense, which is why I probably went into philosophy, right? Like, wait, why would that happen? Or if God were good, then what? And I had all these conundrums. What makes me feel connected are the stars, whether it's looking at them or I just watched a documentary the other day and I find that goosebumpy. I guess I have faith in the unknown and the unseen, which is part of a lot of religious tenets, right? Believe that which you haven't seen yet and you will. So that to me sparks that spiritual connected everything-ish thing for me. And I kind of, when I don't think of God at all. I don't think of a singular. To me, it's almost like I think of energy, some unknown out there. So to me, that's what really puts me in that vibe. I mean, nature does it, and I live in the mountains and I spend a lot of time in nature, and that really makes me feel connected to like everything. But it's really like looking at those, like National Geographic documentaries on space and the cosmos and the history of our universe and what we know. And that stuff just, I don't know. I know a lot of people, it scares them because they're like, that's all I know. Oh my God, I can't look at it. But for me, I don't know. Hopefully that makes sense.
No, it made a lot of sense. And to me and to everyone else has heard this a million times, is that it is a very personal thing. And, again, I am an Orthodox Jew, and mainly we're speaking to a mainly Orthodox, a little bit of Christian, but mainly an Orthodox audience. But I fully believe that you do not have to be religious to be spiritual. And you can certainly be spiritual and not be religious, because I know a lot of religious people who are not, I don't consider them to be spiritual, because spirituality kind of goes beyond that. And it's more of a feeling than it is of a, follow the textbook, by rote. There's got to be, to me, there's got to be more than just follow it. You've got to have passion and feeling behind it. And so every answer is a good answer.
Yeah. And I mean, not to take up too much time here, but
Okay.
I think, when I look at like my grandmother, who was like the youngest female attorney in the state of Illinois, and probably one of two people in a law school back then in the 1930s, she was a blonde Jew, and so was my grandfather. And there's so much anti-Semitism. If any Jew listening has not ever seen the 1946 movie called Gentleman's Agreement, I would, because it really explained to me kind of what they went through. It was that passing thing, right? This ability to pass with blonde hair and feeling like they had to. So they denied our heritage and kind of were like, oh, we're of the Baha'i faith, or we're just going to go to the Unitarian church and pretend like we're not, because again, it was all about appearances, and because they didn't feel they could get ahead and all this kind of stuff. Come to now, not that I'm like going to temple every week or have adopted some newfound religious, but I find it important to talk and tell people what my heritage is, because of the anti-Semitism that's going on right now. It's so horrible and so awful for us, especially in the States, to see what's going on. I'm sure you guys are witnessing it from there. So in that sense, I have become, I think, a little bit more tribal, maybe, because here's the thing, as someone who's a blonde, blue-eyed Jew, you live your life where you hear people say shit about Jews in front of you constantly. And then you're the one that has to go, hey, buddy, by the way, you're talking to a Jew. This is like the story of my life. And it's like your secret undercover. It's a weird thing. And so I find that I do feel a little bit more comfortable with my Jewish friends nowadays and in general, because I feel understood and I feel we have the same plight. And so in a way, I think of becoming a little bit more, not like religious, but you know what I mean? A little bit more tribal with my tribe peeps, because it's something we're all kind of going through right now. Do you know what I mean? In this
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is and it isn't. In other words, there's safety and security kind of in knowing. So even when
camaraderie. Yeah,
even when Israelis, let's say, leave Israel, they tend to move to places where there's an Israeli community. And when Americans move to Israel, they tend to move to a place where there's a very American community most of the time. Like where I live, it's like you could get by without Hebrew here. Like it's a very American community. Just because you want that camaraderie, you want that sense of community. If you don't have family around you, this becomes your family. So it makes a lot of sense. So it really makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that's feeling better now. And like, my mother's actually not Jewish, which I know in Orthodox, you guys, but anyway, my father is, she's not. And my niece, who's probably a quarter Jewish, right? My mother recently took her to Washington, D.C. to go to the Holocaust Museum. My mother was very much like, she cannot grow up. She's in Oklahoma right now, my niece. Wow. But she cannot grow up with whatever they're teaching her. She has got to understand your history. So she's an ally. And my mother's not even Jewish. Like, I almost cried at the wonderfulness of my mother spending probably close to 10 grand to take her niece and her to a trip to DC to educate her about her own heritage. So I think that that's what's most important for us as adults right now. And I'm so glad she did that. So yeah, I'm feeling a little bit more comfort in that kind of camaraderie right now.
That's beautiful. That's really beautiful. My aunt is not Jewish either, and she's amazing. Like, I love her. Like, she, it has nothing to do with being what kind of person you are. So
Yeah.
yeah. So let me ask you, besides your website, where can people find you? What's the best place to connect with you, find you, see your stuff?
I'm all over there. The website elleruss.com is great, but I am most active on Instagram. So, I'm checking messages there more than I am others and may get lost in the shuffle somewhere else. I mean, usually you could just contact me through my website and I will definitely receive it. But yeah, Instagram is sort of where I have the most followers. I post the most. I'm most comfortable with that platform, but I'm pretty much on all of them at this point. And again, if you want to go to my website, it's elleruss.com, or you can just go directly to freethyroidmasterclass.com if you want to. And that's a 1.5 hour instructional video of me, plus a guided healing meditation download, an entire free thyroid guide, which also has paleo primal guide, carnivore guide, AIP, low histamine, some of the healing diets kind of goes through it. It's pretty substantial. So you get a lot in there and it's free. I mean, I know how much money it cost. I didn't have any money when I was going through this, and I had to spend $15,000 that I didn't have at the time to try to fix this. Wasted money on doctors, wasted money on supplements. I know how expensive this is. That's why I put together this I give a lot of free information. That's why I'm always doing these interviews. I know people that are like, I just binged a bunch of your interviews and figured it out. Great. It's nice to sell books and courses. We all want money. That's lovely. I would rather have people not suffer for 7-10 years.
I think it's great. Like really, I appreciate this so much. Like this was such an informative, interview, and you're great. I love your personality. And I just really appreciate you're doing this. And that's, I feel like there's always going to be people, and there's always, when you are as confident as you are and you're willing to give away information for free, because you understand that ultimately everyone who looks at that free, there's still going to be people who are going to want to work with you directly. Like there's never a shortage of people who need help. Like
right. It's not a scarcity mentality. It's not like, if I give away too much, I'm like, no, please go get better. I wish I had my free thyroid masterclass when I was going through this alone,
Yeah. And I think it's also comes from that confidence of seeing how much you understand. And because even as a physical therapist, like it's something you develop over time when you realize like, wait a minute, no, I can teach someone else some of what I'm doing because there's not a shortage of people that need healing and need help. And you know what I mean? And we have to all help each other and support each other. And so I think it's great. Like, I really appreciate this. Thank you so much. This was such a
I
pleasure.
appreciate it, getting the word out. And, if anyone has any questions on this, please feel free to contact me directly. I have worked with people in Israel or Israelis. Sometimes they're out in different countries. And sometimes they come back and forth to the States where they're doing their medical stuff. But yeah, a lot of countries need to get on board. But the more information out there, hopefully things will turn around there as well. I know England is also a really rough place as well for thyroid patients. So,
Yeah.
I mean, look, America is too, listen, I mean, I'm in California. We've got a little bit more functional integrative physicianry out here, but it's getting tough. Thank God for telemedicine and some other things that have come around. So, I'm glad to be a part of that change, and I always will be. And reach out if you have any questions, everybody.
We have back with us here today my friend, my teacher, my mentor, Bracha Krohn. I'm sure you guys remember, but Bracha is the co-director of Midreshet Moriah, and she spends her summers as part of the educational staff of Camp Stone. And she's just one of my favorite people. And I love, love, love what she has to say every single time. She graces us with her presence. And I'm really excited that she's here today. I want to hear what do you have for us? What'd you think of Elle?
Thank you. Hi. Wow. Okay. Elle was a powerhouse.
Yes, she is.
I was listening on 1.5 speed, and she's already on 1.5 speed. So it was
yes, she's amazing.
I really connected to this interview. I myself have been taking Synthroid for years and years and years. And now I feel like I have all these new questions. I remember I had some crazy numbers. She was talking about 0.5 to 5, right? That was the normal.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I'm almost positive I was 8.
Okay, wow.
I think I remember that number 8. And I remember I had all these symptoms. I'm so curious. I definitely am going to go find her free class.
Yeah.
Online, because I'm fascinated by all these symptoms, because I remember talking about a bunch of things going on in my life at the time, and the doctor listening and saying, wait, think we should test your thyroid. And he was so diagnostically on point. It was a doctor in Cleveland. And I thank him for it. But I'm curious. I just want to make sure that every time I take the test here, we're doing T4 and T3 and the Hashimoto. Like now I'm going in a little more empowered, and that's what I want to talk about.
Good, because I will tell you that you're not. Like, meaning there are certain things they don't even do free T3 here. I don't think anywhere in Israel. So you're not necessarily getting all of it.
Okay.
And you have to be specific about a thyroid panel, or they just test TSH.
Okay. So I did learn a lot, and I do feel empowered. And I think that's what resonated. I was listening and thinking about all sorts of things to talk about. Maybe this master gland is an analogy for, and I was going off into all sorts of Torah ideas. And then it hit me. I'm actually more just drawn to her energy and this whole message of, guys, you have got to take your health into your own hands. And you're seeing so many different things going on in your life that you're starting to take all sorts of medications for 10 different problems. Stop. Go back to the source, make sure you're this thyroid, make sure this master gland is producing what it needs to produce, and everything else will fall into place. And it just reminded me how we sometimes really don't sort of drive the ship that is my own health. It's my own health. So I wanted to talk about something that Rav Soloveitchik talks about, which is exactly that point, about being a man of destiny and not what he calls a man of fate. In Hebrew, he uses the words Ben HaGoral and Ben HaYiud. The first one, Ben HaGoral, meaning man of fate. The woe is me, basically the victim card. And man of fate, Ben HaYiud, is the one who decides, where am I going? What is this for? In Hebrew, we say, not asking lama, why, but lima. Same letters, right? Lima.
Right.
For what? Where are we going? And not spending too much time wallowing, but instead feeling like, okay, I have my work cut out for me. I actually wanted to read just a few lines. I took it off the shelf. In English, this is called Fate and Destiny. In Hebrew, Kol Dodido Fake. It's actually for us now talking in the wake of the massacre here in Israel and trying to fight off, evil in the world. The Rav did write this about from the Holocaust to the state of Israel and about the Jewish people. And it's actually very timely now for anybody to review.
Yeah, it really is.
But I'll just read how he talks about this. Forget man of fate for a minute. We're not focusing on man of fate. We're talking about man of destiny. And I just want to read a few lines. He says, this is an active mode of existence, one wherein man confronts the environment into which he was thrown, possessed of an understanding of his own uniqueness, of his special worth, of his freedom, and of his ability to struggle with his external circumstances without forfeiting either his independence or his selfhood. And then again, later on, talks about how possessing the ability to live like a subject. The other one was living like an object. Here we're going to live like a subject, like a creator, an innovator who can impress his own individual seal upon his life and can extricate himself from a mechanical type of existence and enter into a creative, active mode of being. Man's task in the world, according to Judaism, is to transform fate into destiny. And I'll stop there, but it really is resonating these days. And I want to say about our health, that idea that when we pray each day, all these different requests in our main prayer, in our Shemona Esrei, in our 19 brachot, in our 19 blessings that we say every day, we do have a prayer where we ask for health. But we all know that we also take what we, if I have an infection, I take my antibiotics. If I have a splinter, I take out the splinter. If I have fever, I deal with the problem. I don't just sit there and pray, God, heal me. I do what I need to do. Right. Similarly, I always say to students, we have a prayer about, return us to Israel, take me home. And I always say, you can just call 1-800-Nefesh B'Nefesh, which is the agency helping you to go ahead, move to Israel, make Aliyah. So in all of these blessings, I think a lot of times we get stuck in the God help me, God help me. And I really sometimes imagine God looking down and going, I'm not stopping you. I go with my blessing, go. So I was thinking of Elle, talking to people who are really suffering with lots of different symptoms. I'm so tired. I have this brain fog, whatever sort of sex hormones are not being activated well. I was making a whole list here of this master gland, right? All the brain coordination, the heart rate, the temperature, the cholesterol. And I really could imagine someone, I didn't have so many, and I caught it sort of before it got too overwhelming for me to even notice it. The diagnostician, the doctor, was excellent. He was listening to me well and put it together. But I can't imagine the people she's coaching and seeing who are coming with like 8, 10. She said her class talks about 30 to 40 different symptoms. And I really feel like someone like that does feel like a victim. I've been hit by this, and this. I'm done. And to be able to start to dig and unearth the problem and then treat it. And like she said, we're not talking about medication. We're talking about giving your body a hormone it's not making. This is something it needs, and then you bring back health, you bring back function. And I thought that was just the most amazing example of actualizing all of this kind of potential for really deciding our own destiny. And in this area of health, that's really great and exciting. And I really enjoyed it. And I definitely want to go learn more, and definitely have to go just check out as much as I can. You're saying in Israel, I might not be able to find all these tests, but I will try and ask. And just to encourage all of us I really take this to all the different areas of our life, in whatever areas we're feeling, obviously not just thyroid, in any symptoms we're feeling, and then beyond, not just health, but in relationships that we're stuck in financial troubles. I don't know. It's just this attitude of can do. And it reminded me of that. And I personally need that now more than ever. That all of us, have somewhere in life where we need to be reminded, you are a man of destiny.
Oh, I fully agree with you. I mean, that this is why I started this podcast, that I'm a big believer in God helps those that help themselves. And that, there's always something you can do. You may not always get the answer ultimately you want, but you have to do the best you can to help yourself. You can't just sit back. Like you said, you have to pray. Davening is important, but you can't just daven. You have to take
and I was thinking, okay, she has,
steps.
even for her, like there she is coaching. She wrote a book. She has the masterclass. Like, how do you want to access this? How do you want to access it? And you can, like, everybody has to grab something. I always say to students, to my kids, you don't always like the choices you've been given, but there's always a choice. I know you're saying, but I don't want these choices. Okay, so that part you can't control. But you're right. Something is not working well in your body and you wish it wasn't like that. That is true. And what are you going to do about it? That's part of what you
can sit and cry, or you can try to solve the problem.
Yeah, let's get out of it. So I really appreciated everything she brought. Thank you for having her and for suggesting I listen to that one and comment on it.
Well, thank you so much. As always, I really appreciate your insights. They're always spot on. And I love the turn you took it to, or whatever we would say for that. But I love that. I love everybody taking out and bringing the Torah piece that really speaks to them. And I think that was a great take on who she is and what she had to say. And really, such an important point.
Okay, good. Glad to help. Hope that inspired some people.
Absolutely.
Another one. Call me back again for another one.
I absolutely will.
This podcast is for informational purposes only. Please seek guidance from a trusted healthcare professional. By listening to this podcast, you release Holy Health and any of our guests from all liability. I'd like to thank Joker Productions for editing this podcast.